Since the dawn of the movie industry as it stands today, movie makers have been adapting literary works into movie form. From movie adaptations of Gone with the Wind to Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, movie directors and producers have been putting their spin on pop culture classics for decades, creating works that occupy their own corner of the entertainment spectrum. These movies sometimes vary greatly from their originals, while other times they follow word for word. In the case of Alan Moore's Watchmen, much of Zack Snyder's adaptation is true to the comic original, but given the differences in the comic and movie modes, the two differ in some aspects. One thing that separates the modes of comics and movies is the ability of movies to overlay audio with images. Differences in the portrayal of audio between the movie and comic modes are intrinsic to the property of each mode. In comic books, everything is visual, and any portrayal of sound is done through visual forms such as text and sound bubbles. In movies, sound is a property of the media form. Movies actually contain sound, so the viewer knows exactly what they're supposed to hear, leaving no room for personal interpretation of the sounds in the comic. In the comic version of Watchmen, Moore utilizes sound and speech bubbles as the dominant method to portray sound, and to distinguish between speakers in the comic. This can be seen in the blue bubble, used when Dr. Manhattan speaks, versus the ragged bubble when Rorschach speaks, or the ancient scroll-themed caption when Tales of the Black Freighter is being read. None of these distinguishing features are necessary in the movie, because each actor's voice has a different tonality, and it is clear who is speaking and when.
I was investigating a kidnap case. Blair Roach. 6-year-old girl. I was young then.
A few days later, a partially muscled skeleton stands in the hallway and screams for a moment before vanishing.
One custom largely unique to the movie industry is the attention paid to the soundtrack. The songs are chosen to not only accompany the action, but to enhance it with the audience's knowledge of the song and its social context. In the graphic novel, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons do use some songs to add to the setting of the action, but it is subtle and it isn't a major part of the novel. For example, when Dan and Lori are saving the people from the burning apartment building, a Billie Holiday song is playing in the background, and in some of the intertext, Bob Dylan is quoted, but the songs aren't a huge focus in the comic, despite their importance in the movie. The focus in the comic is nothing compared to that paid to the soundtracks of most films such as Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Movies also have the ability to play with sound effects in action scenes. While action scenes in the comic utilize speech bubbles to depict sound effects, the movie includes actual sound effects to enhance the effect of violence. In the movie, actions produce more sound than in the comic scenes. When Rorschach throws the grease in another inmate's face, for example, a gruesome boiling sound is made in the movie to add to the drama of the scene. However, the same scene in the comic lacks speech bubbles entirely. The casting choices made by Snyder in the movie were very close to the way readers interpreted character appearance in the comics. Even though the casting choice was very close to the appearance in the comics, the way viewers perceive the story differs whenever real people are shown instead of comic book characters. The comic characters, although realistic, provide some distance for the reader from the violent, horrific actions of the characters. When real people are used to tell the story, as in the movie, the violence is a lot harder for the viewer to digest, especially with the addition of sound effects. The way scenes are laid out in the comic is similar to how scenes are cut in movies. A good example of this is in Chapter 8, which plays with the movie format in the way it cuts between scenes. The panels cut between Lori and Dan, Rorschach in prison, the detectives, the New Frontiersman newsroom, and other interconnected characters and storylines in a way similar to how a movie cuts in and out of scenes. This is reflected in the movie adaptation of Watchmen, as the movie cuts in and out of these scenes the same way the comic does. A typical characteristic of comics, especially from the 1980s and earlier, is the use of bright colors in the illustrations. Watchmen is no exception to this trend, and uses a vivid color palette everywhere in the panels, from in the background to the characters' costumes. Moore and Gibbons also use vivid colors and drastic color changes to more easily distinguish between different settings. From the use of red in The Murder of the Comedian, to the use of bright colors in the retirement home, where Laurie's mother lives, to the tritone colors used in Tales of the Black Freighter scenes, different color palettes are used to convey different settings and moods in the comic. These differences in color help place the reader in the action, and better allow them to experience the story. This contrasts sharply to the overall depiction of settings in the movie. In the movie, actual settings are used, the skyline of New York, and movie sets for rooms and residences. But everything has a very dark exposure and light level throughout the entire movie, lending much less variety between scenes. This monotone filter detracts from the multi-layered quality that exists as a major part of the comic.
While the boundaries between genres and the goals of different media forms are constantly changing, stereotypes do exist, and these affect viewer opinion when approaching a work. Two such stereotypes are those surrounding movies and literature. Typically, the goal of literature is to entertain, but underlying this is usually a social commentary, especially in highly critically acclaimed works such as Watchmen. With this knowledge, readers often approach the work knowing that the point is to walk away entertained, but also with more knowledge about a certain aspect of society.
Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted when my eyes were stared by the flash of a neon light, it split the night and touched the sound of silence.
In contrast, movies are often viewed mostly as entertainment, and while social commentary can and does exist, most viewers will walk into the movie theater expecting to be entertained. This being said, the movie adaptation of Watchmen is labeled as an action movie and rated R. This automatically sculpts the audience's preconceived notion of what the movie will be, diminishing the effect of the social commentary. This notion is also largely why some aspects of the novel had to be changed, such as the gigantic squid-like creature becoming an explosion that looks like it was caused by Dr. Manhattan. While there are a few major discrepancies between the comic and the movie, most of the movie adaptation stays true to its original. Most of these discrepancies can be attributed to what would be considered realistic for a movie. These two modes also have very different target audiences, and changes were made to accommodate these differences. While similarity between source material and movie adaptation increases box office success, there is a line between staying true to the source and making a reasonable profit.